I wasn't supposed to be out there alone. My brother was meant to come with me, but he bailed at the last minute, mumbling something about bad weather rolling in. I laughed it off. A solo winter hike through the northern woods would be a story to tell. I didn't realize at the time just how true that was. The snow was already thick under my boots when I left the trailhead, muffling every step. The forest swallowed sound in a way that was almost unnatural. No cars, no birds, just the crunch of snow and the whistle of wind sneaking through skeletal pines. By the time I reached the first mile marker, I already had that strange feeling. You know, the one where your gut whispers you're being watched. I tried to shake it. Wolves, maybe, or a stray deer. Nothing I couldn't handle. Still, I tightened my scarf and pulled my jacket closer, telling myself not to look over my shoulder so often. The cabin I'd rented was another 5 miles in. It wasn't much, just an old hunter's shack my uncle used to use years ago. No electricity, no plumbing, just 4 walls and a roof. The kind of place where the silence hums so loud you swear it's alive. By the time I made it there, dusk had already draped the woods in gray. My breath fogged in the air as I fumbled with the lock. The cabin door creaked like it hadn't been opened in decades. Inside smelled of dust and damp wood. My flashlight beam caught the outline of a cot, a rusted stove, and shelves sagging under forgotten cans of food. I lit a lantern, the flame crackling to life, chasing shadows into the corners. That's when I saw it. A set of claw marks across the inside of the doorframe. 4 long, jagged slashes dug deep into the wood as if something had tried to force its way in. I froze. No bear claws looked like that. They were too long, too deliberate. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe some drunk hunter decades ago thought it'd be funny. I unpacked my gear, forced my mind to focus on the firewood, the stove, the water I'd need to melt from snow. Anything but those gouges in the wood. Night fell fast. The wind outside picked up, howling through the trees. Somewhere far off, a branch snapped, then another. I paused mid-bite of a granola bar, ears straining. It wasn't just branches. It was rhythmic, deliberate, footsteps. The sound circled the cabin, crunching slow and heavy in the snow. My breath caught in my throat. I killed the lantern, plunging the room into blackness, and pressed myself flat against the wall. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, the silence was worse than the sound. My heartbeat was a drum in my ears. Then, from the other side of the thin wooden wall, came a sound that chilled me more than the winter air ever could. Breathing. Slow. Rasping. Wet. It dragged in long, shaky gulps like whoever or whatever was out there hadn't taken a real breath in years. I clenched my fists, every instinct screaming at me not to move. Through a crack in the wall, I thought I saw something pale glide between the trees. Not white like snow, pale like stretched skin. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed in the dark. Eventually, the breathing faded. The footsteps receded, swallowed by the storm. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the cabin, every groan of the wind, I swore it was back, watching, waiting. By sunrise, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Cabin fever setting in early. But when I stepped outside, I found the snow packed with prints circling the shack. Not boots, not paws. Long, skeletal impressions, pressed deep as though made by something impossibly tall and thin. And scattered among them, here and there, were bare, Human footprints, frozen solid in the snow.
I didn't leave the cabin that morning. The tracks in the snow kept me inside, pacing the floorboards like a trapped animal. The human footprints bothered me the most. Bare feet, no shoes, no socks, in sub-zero temperatures. Whoever made them shouldn't be alive. I told myself it had to be a trick of the light, maybe ice formations. Maybe I wanted to believe that more than I should have. The day dragged on, heavy and silent. The firewood snapped and hissed in the stove, but outside the forest stayed too quiet. No birds, no squirrels, not even the whisper of wings overhead. It was as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. By nightfall, the hunger hit. I hadn't eaten since the granola bar. I found a can of beans on the shelf, the label faded but still intact. The metal was ice cold in my hands. I pried it open with my knife and ate it straight, shoveling the tasteless mush into my mouth. But as soon as I swallowed, something strange happened. I thought I heard my name. It was faint, almost like a sigh carried on the wind, but clear enough to stop me mid-bite. I held my breath, ears straining. Nothing. Just the fire's crackle. Then again, softer this time. Eli. The can slipped from my hands, clattering to the floor. My pulse thudded in my ears. No one knew I was here. No one should know my name. I forced myself to believe it was the wind, just the wind. But as the hours passed, the voice came back, always soft, always close to the walls. Sometimes it whispered my name. Sometimes it muttered words I couldn't catch, garbled and wet, like someone trying to talk through a mouthful of water. The worst was when it laughed, low and hollow, like it was coming from inside my chest. I pressed my hands against my ears, rocked on the cot, whispered prayers I hadn't spoken since I was a child. It didn't stop. At some point, I must have dozed because I woke with my cheek pressed against the wood floor. The fire had burned down to embers. The cabin was freezing, and the whisper was inside, right above me. I tilted my head slowly, afraid of what I'd see. In the reflection of the stove's glass, I caught it, just for a heartbeat. A face. Not a whole one. Just the suggestion of it. Hollow eyes. Teeth too sharp. Too many. Skin stretched thin as parchment. It hovered in the air like smoke before vanishing back into shadow. I scrambled to the lantern, fumbling with the match. The flame flared, spilling weak light across the room. Nothing. Just my gear. Just four walls. But the air stank of rot, sour and metallic, like raw meat left to spoil. I didn't sleep again. I sat against the wall with my knife in my hand, watching the shadows crawl across the ceiling. When dawn finally came, I convinced myself again that exhaustion was to blame, that my mind was playing tricks. But when I opened the door, I saw new tracks in the snow. This time, they led up to the window. Long, bony impressions, pressed right against the cabin wall, like something had stood there for hours, staring in. And in the frost on the glass, where my breath should have fogged the pain, a single word was scrawled by a finger dragged through the ice. Hungry.
I thought about leaving. I really did. But when I packed my bag and stepped outside, the silence hit me harder than the cold. The forest wasn't just quiet. It was empty. Snow blanketed the ground in every direction, undisturbed except for those long, skeletal tracks. They looped around the cabin like a noose, each imprint deeper than my boots could ever make. I swear, somewhere as wide as my forearm, as though claws had raked down alongside the feet. I didn't make it 20 yards before the smell hit me. It wasn't smoke.
It wasn't pine. It was rot. Wet, sour meat. My stomach clenched, bile rising in my throat. I followed it without meaning to, drawn deeper between the trees. That's when I found the deer, or what was left of it. Its rib cage was split open like kindling, ribs gnawed down to splinters. The head was gone entirely, torn away, leaving only a ragged stump of spine. Steam still rose from the carcass, frosting in the winter air. It hadn't been dead long. My heart hammered. Wolves didn't do this. Bears didn't do this. Whatever it wasn't hunting to eat. It was destroying. I stumbled back, branches snagging my jacket. That's when I heard it again. My name. Eli. This time, the voice was clear, echoing between the trees. Not whispered, called. I froze, every muscle locking tight. It didn't sound garbled this time. It sounded human, familiar. It sounded like my brother. Eli, where are you? The voice was shaky, desperate the way he used to sound when we were kids lost in the cornfields near our house. For one insane moment, I almost called back. My throat tightened, lips parting. But then I remembered, my brother hadn't come with me. He was 200 miles away, sitting in his warm apartment, probably laughing at himself for letting me hike alone. That's when the mimicry began. Voices all around me, my mother, my best friend, people I hadn't seen in years. They all cried out, begging me to follow. Some laughed, some sobbed, but threaded through every voice was the same wet rasp I heard outside the cabin. I ran. Branches whipped my face, snow filled my boots. By the time I burst back into the clearing, gasping, the stench followed me like smoke. I slammed the cabin door shut and braced it with the cot. My lungs burned, every nerve sparking with fear. Then came the scratching. Long, slow, deliberate drags of claws across the wood. Not frantic, patient, testing. I pressed my back against the door, knife clutched tight, heart thundering. The scratching stopped. Then, 3 knocks. Measured. Calm. Like someone asking politely to come in. I didn't move, didn't breathe. And from the other side of the door, a whisper slithered through the cracks.
I lasted 2 more nights in that cabin. 2 nights of whispers, scratches, and footsteps circling endlessly. I hardly ate. Sleep came in stolen minutes, broken by dreams of teeth and claws. On the 3rd night, the storm hit. Snow slammed against the roof. Wind howled like screaming voices. The fire in the stove guttered and died, leaving the room dark and brittle with cold. That's when the door creaked open. I had barricaded it. I know I had. The cot was still wedged tight, my pack stacked against it. But the wood groaned anyway, swinging wide into the black. The stench hit first, rot and iron. My eyes watered, stomach lurching. Then it stepped inside. It ducked under the frame, impossibly tall and thin, its body bent like broken branches. Skin clung to bones in ragged sheets, stretched too tight, gray and veined. Its head was skull-like, the mouth splitting impossibly wide, rows of jagged teeth glinting in the dark. Eyes like pits of coal fixed on me, unblinking. It moved slow, deliberate, each step cracking the floorboards. The lantern light barely touched it, as if the shadows bent to cling around its frame. My knife shook in my hand, useless against something that wasn't supposed to exist. It spoke. Not with words at first, with hunger. The sound rattled in my skull, a guttural groan that made my bones ache. Then, in a voice stitched from every loved one I'd ever known, it whispered, "Eli, come."
My legs almost obeyed. My body leaned forward, like a puppet tugged by strings. My skin prickled, blood roaring in my ears. But then, something snapped. My brother's laugh flashed in my head, not the imitation, but the real one, warm and stupid, the way he laughed when he burned pancakes. It was enough. I staggered back, slashed with the knife. The blade scraped against its arm, tearing skin that split like old leather. Black ichor spilled, hissing as it hit the floor. The thing shrieked, not human, not animal, a scream like metal tearing. It lunged. I dove aside, crashing into the shelves. Cans rattled to the ground. My lungs burned, my vision swimming. By some miracle, I scrambled to the stove. I grabbed the iron poker buried in ash, its tip glowing faint with heat. When it lunged again, I drove the poker forward. It sank deep into its chest. The scream shattered the cabin. Glass exploded from the window. The walls shook. The stench doubled, choking, burning my throat. Then, with a final convulsion, the thing tore backward, crashing through the door into the storm. The forest swallowed its scream as it fled. I left at dawn. The storm had eased, leaving the world white and still. Tracks tore through the snow, deep gouges leading away from the cabin into the trees. I didn't follow. Every step back to the trailhead felt like walking through a graveyard. The silence was worse than ever, pressing against my skull. The smell lingered faint in the air, carried on the wind. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. I drove without stopping, without looking in the rearview mirror, until the forest was nothing but a smear of trees behind me. I told myself I'd never go back. But sometimes, in the quiet hours of night, I still hear it. The scrape of claws across wood. The whisper of my name, stretched and broken. Sometimes, when I wake, the stench of rot hangs in the room like smoke. And last week, when I checked the frost on my apartment window, there was a word traced into the ice. Hungry.